do you want more?
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you for your time, Ruben. I appreciate it.
Hey, this is great. Sisters of Mercy, you guys are doing a North American tour. We're looking forward to seeing you guys. I got one of my friends is going to cover the show, so we're excited about that. But first of all, I was reading a little bit about you, and I think you worked with Lauren Harris at some point, right?
That's correct, yes.
So how did that all come to be? Because I know Richie Faulkner, who's in Priest now, also worked with Lauren there for a bit. And you came on board afterwards, or was it a totally different project at that point?
That's a really good question. In fact, Richie came to me. I knew him a little bit from the London scene, and he came to me and he said, "Look, there's this really great opportunity that I've been offered. However, I want to make sure that when I step away from the Lauren Harris band, I've got someone to come in and take over." And I was very honored that he asked me to do that for him. At that point, he couldn't even tell me that he was going to be getting into Priest.
Okay.
Which when I did find out, however long later it was,
sure,
my mind was blown because I'm a huge Priest fan. So it was such an honor to know that I'd been part, even in a very by proxy manner, of being involved somehow in helping him be a part of that, just by stepping into the Lauren band on his behalf. And when I joined the Lauren band, it was a little bit different than what it had been previously with him. It was heavier, it was more metal, it was I think that, but he'd written some really great songs for it that we were playing.
Now, with that, how did that? You were in that band till it eventually disbanded, right? Because she went on to do other stuff. I think she's done some acting or something like that.
Well, it sort of. Actually, I think my tenure in it was quite short.
Was it?
It was, yeah. It was like early 2011 till later that year. And the reason why I stepped away was I just couldn't commit the time, because I was doing the Sisters of Mercy, and I also had my own band at the time, Night by Night, that I had to put a lot of time into. So even when I joined the Lauren band, I said, I'm happy to step in and help. I'm not sure how long I can commit to this because of other stuff. And we were actually, we reached a very amicable agreement that I was to step away, and they had somebody else sort of running in tandem with me anyway, who was a great guitarist. But it was a really amazing experience because we got to rehearse at Steve Harris's mansion, which was just something I never thought I'd say or have the experience of doing that. And it was a really great experience being in the band with her, because she's a phenomenal singer. And I felt that she really, really was dedicated to developing her voice and her stage presence. And the people that had been chosen for the band were great as well. Tom Gentry, who then went on to join Gun and then the Raven Age, and Mitch and Ollie, and they were really, really fantastic, nice musicians. And it was a great experience being part of it.
Right. And then, like you said, you joined the Sisters back in 06 or something, right? You've been
Correct.
in the band for a little bit. So tell me about that. How did you land that gig, the audition, or however the process was? I don't know if it was a situation similar to Faulkner where they knew about you and they approached you about it, but if you can give us the lowdown on that.
I think there is a parallel, I feel, between Faulkner joining Priest and me joining the Sisters, which is that in both instances, both Richie and I had done things in the past. We had experience of touring. He more so at that point, because when he joined Priest, I think he'd done some actual proper international touring and stuff like that. And when I joined the Sisters, I'd done a certain amount with my own band at the time. And the parallel being that we were both guitarists who had experience and were ready to step up, but we weren't so well known that our joining of the band would give a certain coloration or expectation to the, if someone like, someone with a real kind of name and legacy joined one of those bands, it might also suddenly feel like almost like a collaboration, or that people would have certain expectations. So I think there was a parallel there in terms of the thinking that went into that. However, when I auditioned for the Sisters, I didn't know what I was auditioning for. I wasn't told. I was
Oh,
simply
wow.
told to come to an audition
So,
for something.
so hold on a minute. So if you go into an audition, what do you play? Because I would assume that, if somebody's auditioning for Priest, they're going to say, hey, learn these songs, right? Or if somebody's would be, auditioning for any band, you'd want to know if they know the tunes. So take us into that, because what do you show up just with your guitar and you hope for the best?
Well, first of all, I was very skeptical about the whole thing because I was just told by this very, very confident man on the phone who phoned me up and wouldn't tell me who he was or what his band was, only that we have a US tour and we need a new guitarist. I was very skeptical and I was like, but always, give things a chance, always see what happens. So I said to him, well, if you won't tell me what the band is or what even the band is like, can you tell me at least what I should prepare? And the man on the phone said, bring your guitar and some Hendrix licks.
Oh,
so
no kidding. Wow.
I went along with no idea what I was auditioning for. And the process was 3 guys in a room, one with a guitar, one with a laptop, and one guy sat on the sofa with a can of beer, a woolly hat on, and a pair of sunglasses.
All right.
Later turned out to be Eldridge, of course.
Okay. Oh, man.
And walked into this room. I don't know what I'm even auditioning for. I'm very skeptical, as I said. And the process was that the guitarist would play riffs at me and say, can you play this? And I can't read music, but I'm good at picking up things by ear. So it was quite easy for me to play things back. He said, can you do some improv over this? I did that. And bear in mind here that I was aware of the Sisters of Mercy. I liked a couple of their albums I really liked, but I wasn't like a huge fan. And also, I didn't recognize who it was for a number of reasons. One, the people in the room were not the same people who were on my Vision Thing album cover, other than Eldridge.
Right.
And secondly, so much of how we recognize people generally is about context. So have you ever had that situation, Ruben, where you see someone and you have to like double take because you don't expect to see them there.
Right.
So you almost don't recognize it as them.
Sure.
So I was walking into this room as in like no idea who these guys are. And I still thought the whole thing was very small time because it just sounded too good to be true. But what I later realized in retrospect, that what the guitarist was playing me was riffs of Sisters songs that had not been recorded. So they still had a Sisters feel to them, but there was no way I could have ever heard them unless I'd gone to a show.
Right.
But they still, as I said, had that Sisters feel. So part of my mind went, hang on, this sounds like the Sisters of Mercy. Could it possibly be them?
Right.
So I played a famous Sisters riff just to see if anybody would say anything. And the guy with the can of beer and the woolly hat and the shades goes, that's one of our songs. Now, from that moment, I was so nervous. I remember looking down at my hands, and my hands are shaking because not only am I in the presence of an artist who was an important part of my development as a teenager and as a musician, I could also potentially be in this band. And how mind-blowing that was. So I realized I was right on the cusp of possibly a life-changing experience, definitely a life-changing experience. But I was very grateful that I'd had half an hour to just swagger in there like, who the hell are these guys? I don't really care. Relax, just play, whatever. There was none of this is the audition. It was just like, yeah, whatevs. And in hindsight, as I said, I was quite grateful for that. So then they phoned me up a couple of days later. At the time, I was working in a 7-Eleven, essentially, and teaching a few guitar lessons here and there. And I got this call saying, yeah, we want you to do it. And then 6 weeks later, I'm on the tour bus, Death Valley, first show.
Wow. And a curiosity, I know you said that they emphasized, bringing some Hendrix licks. Did you have any in your back pocket for this audition? And what were those?
Well, I never even got to play them. I think it was just, I remember sitting on the, I was on the Mega Bus, which if any British person will tell you is like the worst bus company because it's just the cheapest one. At that point in time, you could literally go from city to city for £1.
Oh, wow.
So I was on the Mega Bus with my guitar, like practicing Purple Haze, thinking, am I going to get asked to play this?
Yeah. Oh, wow. And I would imagine you had some anxiety. You were nervous as you walk into this audition. Was that the case or not necessarily?
Well, the kind of part of it was curiosity
Hmm.
because again they've been talking a big game about we're doing this, we're doing that. I was like, okay. I was actually a little bit sort of nervous that I was walking
Hmm.
into this building in a strange city, a strange building with strange people, with my
Hmm.
guitar,
Right.
that I didn't even know who they were or what I was doing. So I have a friend who works for the police, and I said to him, if you don't hear from me in an hour, this is where I am.
Right. Oh boy. Oh wow. So uh, you're slightly nervous. At what point do you calm down a little bit and the nerves kind of ease down a little bit?
Well, I think the whole thing just seemed so kind of bizarre, and
Mhm.
I was, as I said, I didn't really have any expectation, and I
Yeah.
was approaching the whole thing with not only sense of skepticism, but also almost like a certain not aloofness, but I just felt like this doesn't really matter. This is just an interesting experiment for me
Right.
as I begin this next stage of my career as a musician. These are the sort of things that are going to happen. I just moved to London, so I just
Hmm.
moved to the capital. I think, well, that's where I'm going to do a lot of auditions. That's where things
Right.
happen. So this was just another thing.
Okay. All right. I got you. As I know you mentioned you weren't the biggest Sisters fan. I mean, you knew the material and stuff like that. Can you think back as to when you discovered them? What was the tune? What was that like for you?
Yeah, 100%. The first song I ever heard from them was called "When You Don't See Me," which is off the Vision Thing album.
Hmm.
And as an uncle of mine who is only 8 years older than me, so I've always looked to him. I always looked to him through my childhood for
Okay.
musical inspiration.
Right.
He gave me this Vision Thing cassette to borrow,
Hmm. Oh, there
and
you go.
um, as you might remember, sometimes you'd get a
Right.
cassette off somebody and it was on
Hmm.
side two, and you weren't going to rewind
Right.
it, which was the start. You just chucked it in and played it.
Sure.
So
Right.
the fact it was on side two to begin with, which is where
Okay.
that song is
Right.
placed on the, meant
Right.
that it was the first song I heard. And I instantly fell in love with it because it combined high production values and this sort of 80s rock kind of power with
Hmm.
a very kind of enigmatic, low baritone vocal.
Hmm.
Normally, with that sort of music, I've been used to hearing a very kind of high vocal on
Right.
that stuff. You know, your Def Leppard's, Judas Priest, etc.
Right.
But this was this very cool conversational vocal over, and it was such an odd like juxtaposition that I instantly thought this is fantastic. Plus, the lyrics were really good. And at that point, I
Hmm.
was 14, and I was starting to really engage with that sort of side of things where everything in your life is bad and dark, and you know
Hmm.
you yourself are this mysterious, cool character desperately trying to like have a sense of identity. And so the lyrics of that song really connected with that element of my development as a person. I felt like I'm different, I'm alternative, and this song speaks to me on that level.
Right. Out of curiosity, what's your uncle think of you now being in a band that he allowed you or gave you the opportunity to discover?
He's really proud and always been really responsive, and he even came to one of the shows, as you can imagine, and it was just
Yeah.
very surreal. Because not
Why?
only is it the Sisters, but there are a number of other bands that I've been
Sure.
connected
Oh,
with
I'm sure.
that he also introduced me to, you know, whether that be Therapy or the Cult or Judas
Oh,
Priest or
yeah.
whatever. There's some sort of connection that I've had with those bands,
Nice.
and I sort of update him now and then and say, "Oh, by the way, we're doing this," and he's like, "This is insane." And sometimes it's like really obscure stuff
Sure.
that I recently did a track with a guy called well, a guy called Robin McCauley, who
Oh,
was yeah, and
yeah,
he
from
was
Shanker.
yeah, and he was
Yeah.
singing on. He was doing the vocal, and I was
Hmm.
doing a guitar solo on it, and it was this sort of collaboration thing.
Right.
And I said to Uncle Jonathan, I said, "This is amazing. Like, do you remember this singer?
Hmm.
Because he sang on a Far Corporation cover of Stairway to Heaven
Oh,
that my uncle and I used to listen to all the time."
right.
Because it was I don't know if it was a cover that many people have heard, but it was actually like it was done in like 1985, and it was heavier and more hair metal and
Mm,
stuff,
right.
and so for me to say like you know all these kind of crazy connections to my uncle, here's a really bizarre one that's also happened.
Nice. What's your favorite moment of the show, like a sister's show? You know, is there a particular tune you enjoy performing? Is it maybe you get a little bit of a spotlight, or what is it for you?
I'd say there are like three core key moments of the set that
Hmm.
I always enjoy. One is the initial euphoria of the first couple of songs.
Okay.
The second is usually round about the middle of the set, where we often would play Dominion, because
Mm,
it's a song that really
right.
everyone connects with everybody, and I have a guitar solo in that song,
Hmm.
which I've always really enjoyed playing, and tried to make it like the original saxophone solo, but with my own
Right.
spin on it. So it's a
Right.
nice sort of combination of things, and then the final section, because historically speaking, we'll play certain big hits in that section that
Mm,
both that I love those songs. The crowd love those songs, and there's this just wonderful kind of celebration
right.
during those sort of last few tunes.
Nice. Okay. Um, as far as new material, I mean, how does that work within the band, and how much of a contribution do you bring to the table when it comes down to any new tunes, down the way? I know, like a lot of the, I guess you could even consider, say that Sisters is like a legacy act, right? I think it's all the hits, a lot of the hits, and over the years they don't make as many records as they used to. But when they do, I think they try to put out the most solid of efforts, to put their best foot forward when it comes down to doing a new tour. As for yourself, I mean, how involved, are you in this process when it comes down to any new material and stuff?
I wasn't until 3 years ago. And 3 years ago, Dylan Smith joined the band as the rhythm guitarist. And then we entered this very prolific phase where we wrote more songs together as that band, as me, Andrew, and for Dylan, than any other era of the band, certainly that I was aware of, in terms of how much material that we
Mhm.
wrote together. And so that's and we had this really good philosophy, which was, no matter how much each one of us brings to this track, we're going to split it three ways exactly.
Mm,
Anything that we all work on together as us three will split equally. And that's so motivating as a musician
mm,
and a writer, because you're not pushing your ideas because they're your ideas. You're
mhm.
pushing the best ideas.
Right, right.
And so that really kind of took the pressure off of, oh, I hope my idea gets through, or feeling
Hmm.
like slighted that, oh, why didn't they
Right,
like my idea?
right, right.
Everybody wants the best ideas. So that's been really good. And obviously Andrew's been 100% on the lyrics. That's his world, and his lyrics are fantastic. And then Dylan and I would bring musical ideas, which we would then develop with Andrew,
Mhm.
and he would cull ideas or encourage more of that. And some stuff we wrote in the room together, like
Okay.
um, Andrew would say stuff like, let's put Dr. Avalanche, the drum machine, on this many beats per minute and just jam. And when we
Mhm.
hear something we like, we'll pull that out and we'll develop it.
Ah,
So yeah, pretty hands on.
yeah. Or I know you said the core three songwriters there. I mean, are you guys pretty open or receptive to feedback from one another? Like, if you get approached about, hey, try this on the guitar, or maybe suggest something lyrically. Does that happen that way, or is it everybody just kind of, handle their respective roles as far as a songwriter?
Great questions. I think there's this openness that each of us has the humility to want to have. Because if you're working with these other people, you respect
Hmm.
their opinions. We'll always take other people's ideas on board. We'll always experiment with each other's. Oh, why don't you try it this way? Okay, I'm always going to try it, and then we can see whether it's better.
Hmm.
There's never any sense of, no, it must be this way, and I'm not going to do it any other way.
Right.
There's always a sense of, let's try stuff,
Hmm.
and the songs have developed quite a lot through that process, even to the point where there's still an element of arrangement writing going on when we play them live. You play it live one night and go, look, maybe that ends too long, or maybe it needs to
Okay.
be longer,
Right.
and everyone's open to, yeah, let's try that.
Yeah. Nice. Next question I was going to ask you about influences. Obviously, your uncle is a huge influence on you, just with his music collection. I know you rattled off a bunch of great bands there from the Cult and Therapy and, obviously Sisters and everything else in between. But as far as influences for yourself musically, I mean, who would that be? And is it just limited to guitarists, or is it also vocalists or other musicians?
I think I like quite a diverse span of music, but there is one cohesive thread in all
Mm,
of it, pretty much all of it, that I
okay.
like, which is essentially dark, gritty melody.
Mm,
Okay,
okay.
so something that is like emotional and memorable, and yet it's got an edge to it, and it's got passion, and it's got atmosphere. That's generally what I like, and that can be anything from Kate Bush to No
Mm,
Effects.
yeah.
Um, and anything that's got that sort of darker melodic edge to it, I tend
Mhm.
to like, and that's why sometimes I'll say to a person that I like, let's say, I know, Def Leppard or Bon Jovi, for
Right.
example, and they go,
Right.
"Oh, do you like this?" I go, "No, I don't like that because that's like a really sort of quite happy
Right.
sounding song that they do, whereas I actually prefer stuff that's more melodic in a darker way."
Sure.
The Cure is another example. I love a lot of
Mm,
the Cure stuff. A lot of it doesn't land with me because I almost think it's a bit too poppy and a bit too silly.
right.
Um, and so rather than it being necessarily definitive bands that is the band that I love, it's more like certain eras or certain albums of bands really land with me, whereas others don't. I love ACDC, but there's a certain era of ACDC
Right.
that I champion
Sure.
beyond anything else that they did.
Nice. How do you feel about like a band like Typo Negative? I mean, they're pretty dark, gothic, almost kind of doomy at times as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a band that just for whatever strange reasons I haven't really explored that much. I've heard the obvious songs, Black Number One, Girlfriend's Girlfriend,
Hmm.
and stuff. I'd always thought, yeah, this is good stuff. It's clearly got its own sound.
Hmm.
That sort of dark, kind of grungy '90s metal,
Right.
doomy, very, very specific. I think sometimes I thought it almost bordered on being a bit comical.
Hmm.
You've got again, I only know very obvious songs, and the fact you've almost got like the Monsters finger clips
Sure.
and stuff.
Right. Right.
But I think it's good that there's that humor there. I think that they were
Sure.
quite self-reflexive and self-deprecating in that sense.
Hmm.
I was actually talking to someone on Saturday night at Manchester about Typo, and I said, look, I just never really listened to it, and I
Hmm.
don't really know why. So she made me a playlist. So it's
Oh,
funny that you
nice.
say that because I've got the playlist ready to go.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's not something you reach for on a day-to-day basis because, not a lot of their music or none of their music is really uplifting. But it's interesting because I think you worked with a band that kind of balances that kind of gothy, doomy thing with a melody, and that's 69 Eyes, right? I mean, you worked with them as well. I think they got a pretty good balance of melody where that could be in regular rotation on a day-to-day basis where maybe Typo wouldn't be.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it was, I can't tell you what an honor and how exciting it was for me to work on two songs for their new album. One is the
Mm,
title track, and one is
right.
later on the album. And to be able to work with them on that was just really exciting. And it developed in such an organic way because we'd
Mm.
send ideas back and forth, and every time the other party would be like, "Yes, yes, that's
Oh,
great,
nice.
yes." There was never any kind of like, "Well, I'm not really sure about that," or
Sure.
never any of that sort of anxiety when you go, "God, I really hate that, but I don't know how to tell them." It was always just like, "Yeah, that's great, do more, brilliant."
Right.
And so, yeah, as you say, yeah, they've got both a good grasp on this
Hmm.
atmosphere and this feeling of gravitas, and yet it's melodic, it's rocking, it rocks.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a good example.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's people that are into maybe not that particular subgenre that are fans, kind of like with Sisters as well. I mean, there's people that are into metal that gravitate towards that particular band, or people that are in even maybe pop, gravitate towards the band. People that are into industrial, I mean, I think brings, fans from all various different genres. So, well, last question, or maybe I'll sneak in another one, but
Feel free.
what could we expect from this North American tour? I mean, obviously it's something that you're geeked about. So I've seen a lot of stuff about fans really looking forward to this North American run. So I'm sure it's going to be great. But what do you say?
I'm saying that at this point, and of course everything can change, based on 2022, I'm optimistic that we're going to bring a really good set list, which is a mixture of greatest hits, deep cuts from albums, which is stuff that people will know but won't expect to hear at a show. And as a music fan, I love that. I love when a band brings out a track from like a big album that you'd never expect them to hear, and you're like, I can't believe they're playing track 4 from side 2. So there'll be some of that, and there'll be a number of new songs as well. And the new songs have been really well received by people in the 2022 tours. And I was quite reticent about playing a certain amount of new songs. Because I thought, well, people are going to come and they're going to be like, I don't know this song. And you're going to see a blank faces. But I was very pleasantly surprised that because these songs actually sound so sistersy with our own spin on it, people are just like, this is great. So it's like, as long as it sounds like the band they've come to see, and you're A-being it with songs that they do know, it just makes for a great experience. So I'm really excited about that side of it. I'm really excited about the visual side of it, because the guy that we've been working with, Alan, on the visuals, we've created such a good synergy with him that certainly since I've been in the band, I've not felt anything this strong previously. So it's going to be visually exciting, it's going to be sonically exciting, and it's going to be a great set list. And particularly important to me is the fact that the last time we came to the States, I'd only just been in the band a couple of years, and I feel like I really want to express that this is a very different experience from what anyone would have seen then. If you come to see the band in 2008, this is very different from that now.
Nice. Yeah. How difficult has it been? Well, so there you go with another question. How difficult has it been for you, as a band, to kind of piece together this set list? Because obviously, there's stuff that needs to be in there. You want to take a shot at some of the new material, and that needs to be in there. So obviously with a band with, this kind of history, with each subsequent tour or album release, things start kind of, getting a little bit, I guess, more difficult to really pin down a decent set list that's going to both satisfy probably the band and the fans, right?
Yeah, well, I know that bands have different, band members have different attitudes when it comes to playing, let's call it the hits.
Right.
And I've never written what could be considered as a hit in terms of it's just been played over and over and over all over the world, on the radio, on TV. Andrew has. Other artists obviously have. So I can't empathize with what it must be like to go, oh God, this again, one of my own works. Because the idea of playing of one of my songs becoming really popular and getting to play it to people all over the world is just like so exciting. But I understand that, because you see it many times with established artists with a number of hits. They're like, oh God, do we have to play this? So it must be a thing. But I do feel that when we approach the set list, Andrew's got a really good ability to step back and go, look, I've played this 5,000 times. However, I recognize that part of what we're doing is we are bringing the music that people love to the people. And so there's certain songs that you already feel, both in terms of the hits and the new ones, that we all kind of feel are non-negotiable. So we've got that starting point to go, okay, here's a handful of classics and new ones that we feel we have to play, we want to play. And then you can sort of fill in the dots in between, maybe change things up night by night. There are certain songs that are sort of interchangeable. So say, for example, you're going to say, well, let's do this song from the first album. Then you can change that 2 nights later to, okay, we'll take that one out, but we'll replace it with another song from the first album. It's sort of doing the same job, like for like, that sort of thing.
Oh, nice. Well, that keeps it fresh too, I think, right?
Yeah. And also, we do find that this is the sort of band where people will come to multiple shows. So
Right.
it's quite nice to see, if you see a lot of the same faces in the front row,
Mhm.
to be there going, I can't wait to see what they're gonna when we bring this
Sure.
out, and then
Sure.
see the excitement of they've been
Right.
to like X amount of shows, and now you're playing this one. What?
Sure. Nice. That's great. Last question. So, end with something about more of a factoid that about yourself that we wouldn't know unless you disclosed it. So, what's a particular fact or something of a factoid about you that we wouldn't know unless you told us rather?
I've had I've had a very modest career in acting.
Oh,
As in film and theatre. When I say career, I mean very
okay.
modest. As in,
Okay.
I did a bunch of stuff in my teens and my 20s, and I'm even in a couple of music videos that you can find now, which I'm not going to mention,
Oh no.
where I actually play like one of the main characters in like the narrative of the music video.
Okay. I
So
got you.
I did a bunch of stuff like that in the sort of in my 20s, that's still out there. So
Okay.
there you go.
Well, you know what? I think I'm going to probably do an internet search. Maybe I'll find it, right? But hey, man, thank you for your time. It was a blast. We'll get the link to Ray at the PR and then get it to you guys so you can post it on your socials. We'll add your socials as a link as well. And, have a great tour and we'll be there.
Thanks so much, Ruben. I appreciate it. And really great questions as well. It was really interesting for me to do this.
Cool. Thank you. Well, hope to do it again somewhere down the road, right?
Absolutely. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you, Ruben.
Take care.
See you, man.
Bye.